Hello everyone, hope you are having a fantastic day. This is my Geoguessr tips video for South America. My goal for this video is to help you guys identify the countries of South America as well as specific areas of these countries. Hopefully South America is something you can master, as you can identify these countries even faster. Anyways, I hope you all enjoy this video, and do consider subscribing near the description below. Our first country here is Colombia, and lucky for us, Colombia is quite easy to recognize, as it is the only South American country with yellow plates, so that's quite helpful. Another great clue are the crosses on the backs of signs. You can see this in Brazil as well. However, in Brazil, the back of the sign will be black instead of any other color. So if you see a cross on the back of a sign and it isn't black, then you are almost surely in Colombia. Colombia as a country is mainly mountainous, mainly green mountains. However, in the north portion of Colombia, it's very dry. You may see dry mountains or maybe drier plain regions. Down here, it's still pretty like green mountains. Green mountains go for most of the country. And the more jungly parts of Colombia are in this portion right here, as it gets kind of closer to the Amazon rainforest. Our next country here is Ecuador, and it's similar to Colombia in many ways. For example, there are many green hills and mountains surrounding both countries, and also these concrete roads here are quite prominent in both countries. However, there are differences to Colombia and Ecuador. For example, in Ecuador you will often see these turning signs spammed. So right here we have 3, even though you'd probably only need 1. And then right here we actually have 4. They're a little bit hard to see, but 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 of those. And sometimes you can see up to like 6 of these things. I don't know why, but in Ecuador they just kind of spam them. It's very strange. You will often see these white and red bollards as well. They're very tiny, and there are many different variations of them, but you will often see them alongside the road. There's even one right here. You can't see the red, but I'm sure it's there. And then also, you will see this thick antenna here in Ecuador, Colombia, Brazil, or Mexico. So that could be a little bit helpful. For the Galapagos Islands, these are a territory of Ecuador, and they are sort of jungly, I suppose. And you will often see this boat traveling through the Galapagos Islands. So if you see like a white boat with people in it, sometimes it even has the flag on it, like the Ecuadorian flag, you are in the Galapagos Islands. However, the Galapagos Islands can also be kind of dry, as you can see here. It's pretty hard to recognize the Galapagos specifically if you're playing like a world map. But if you're playing a South American map and you either see that boat or some kind of like dry looking islands, you're probably in the Galapagos. Before looking at the specific locations of Peru, I want to first kind of do an overview of the country. So the coasts are typically going to be a lot more dry, while the more kind of central land will be a lot more like greener mountains. Those are the kind of things you'd see. So for example, in this location here, we have a lot of brick buildings, you'll notice. That is one thing that happens quite a bit in Peru and Bolivia, but we will get to Bolivia later. You will also notice we actually have a white car here. Now you can see a white car in many countries in South America. Peru is one of them. However, you can also see a black car in Peru, as we will see a bit later. There are some green mountains in the background. So if you see green mountains, brick buildings, a white car, you may be in Peru. However, we should look at other locations as well. Now here, we have sort of a deserty mountain location. However, we do know this is Peru for sure because of this black and white pole right here. You will not see this in any other South American country. It is pretty specific to Peru. In this last location here, we are sort of in the south of Peru, which tends to be a lot drier than the north. However, it is dry along the coast, that is still true. And we have another one of these black and white poles. So if you see a deserty location with black and white poles, could be mountainous or could be flat, but most likely mountainous, you are probably in sort of the southern part of Peru. Our next country here is Brazil. Our first clue here is just the red soil, honestly. Brazil is probably the country with the most red soil when it comes to South American countries. You can see some in Bolivia and you can see some in Argentina, but I would say Brazil is very much the most common place to see red soil. So, if you're given a jungle location like this and you're thinking, looks kind of South American, probably go for Brazil there. Our next clue here is actually a language tip. So, Brazil speaks Portuguese, unlike the other countries which speak Spanish, and it's kind of hard to differentiate these languages a lot of the time. But one very good tip is the C here. It has a little squiggly underneath it. It's kind of like an accent. I'm pretty sure that's only specific to Portuguese. And then the biggest tip of all is if you see CAO, it is almost always going to be Portuguese. I don't think I've ever seen an exception to this. That's the main distinction between Portuguese and Spanish, is just the fact that CAO is just a very, very common thing to see in Portuguese. The last tip we have here for Brazil is mainly the fact that it can be kind of tropical, especially near the south, I believe. And then we have black-backed signs. Now this is actually pretty huge. If you see a black-backed sign in South America, pretty much always going to be Brazil. I don't believe I've seen an exception to that, which is pretty awesome. As sort of an overview of the country, I kind of want to go over the specific areas of the country that could be pinpointed, I suppose. So in the western part of the country, this whole like western half you see here, it's mainly going to be jungly. There's a lot of like red soil around these areas too, especially in like Mato Grosso and Mato Grosso do Sul. A lot of red soil around these areas. Over in the northeastern part of Brazil, you will see a lot of these kind of poorer housing. I don't know how else to describe it. The housing quality is just, I feel like it's worse the more northeast you go for Brazil. And it's a lot better like down here. Near the Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo area, it gets kind of hilly and there's a lot of agriculture around those areas. So if you see kind of hills with a lot of agriculture and it kind of looks Brazilian, you are probably not too far away from Rio de Janeiro, probably in this area. And lastly, I could not find it on the map, but this is actually a very helpful tip. The state of Parana and kind of these other southern states, there's a specific tree that you can see in these areas called the Parana tree. And it's kind of like it looks like a pine tree almost, but it's like very strange. You got these sort of limbs coming off of it, and it almost looks semi-tropical. It's very interesting, but you will only really see this in the state of Parana, the state of Santa Catarina, and the state of Rio Grande do Sul. And maybe you could see it a bit in this part of Argentina, but it's very specific to southernmost Brazil. So I thought that was a helpful tip to include. Also, I forgot to mention, Brazil is a great country to learn the phone codes for. There are a lot of them, probably around 50 phone codes for Brazil. However, if you do know them, then you will see them quite often. They're just pretty commonly seen in Brazil for some reason. And if you know them, you will literally be able to almost pinpoint exactly where you are. Like for example, I think Porto Alegre, I'm pretty sure it's like 52. Pretty sure that's their phone code. If you see an 052 or whatever, you could literally just get Porto Alegre right off the bat. And even knowing around the locations where they are, like for example, you'd see 50s down here, you would see like 40s like right here. Even if you know that kind of stuff, very beneficial to learn the basic areas of these phone codes so that you guys can pinpoint Brazil to the best of your ability. Our next country here is Bolivia. So Bolivia can be a little bit similar to Peru in a lot of ways. They can be very difficult to differentiate. I can't say too much to differentiate them, but I would say the main difference is that Bolivia has more brick buildings than Peru, like just straight up. There are just brick buildings everywhere. I believe this location is La Paz. La Paz especially has a lot of brick buildings with mountains surrounding them. It's pretty hard to see the mountains from here, but they are there, trust me. They are there. As well, you will see a white car. Now in Peru you can have a white car or a black car. Bolivia, it's only white car. You will only see a white car in Bolivia, which is nice because that can be a way to differentiate Peru and Bolivia a little bit. I mean, you have higher odds of it being Bolivia if you see a white car. As far as the areas for Bolivia, you're mainly going to see mountains, especially along these like cities here. However, in sort of the area, I think above Santa Cruz, it does get a little bit like plains biome sort of. So that is something to notice about that. Also, Potosi and La Paz look quite similar. They're kind of mountainous with a lot of brick buildings. I kind of noticed that in one of my diverse world videos actually. So yeah, just some stuff to know about Bolivia. Pretty cool country. And let's move on to the next one. Our next country here is Chile. Now in Chile you will get a white car, and in the north, which we are in currently, it is very deserty, kind of similar to southern Peru. It's just really, really dry, and it is fairly mountainous. There are, I don't know if those are hills or mountains, but there are more mountainous locations than this one in northern Chile. Now, one interesting thing about Chile, actually, is the fact that I haven't mentioned this, but every country in South America has yellow lines for the center of their road. Maybe it's a double yellow line, maybe it's like a dashed yellow line, but they will have like yellow lines in the center of the road. However, Chile actually has white lines. So if you see white lines in the middle of the road and you think it looks South American, then you're probably in Chile. As far as an overview of the country goes, the north will mostly be sort of deserty mountains or deserty sort of plains like this one is. The center will be kind of a mix of the two. It's kind of just sort of mountainous, green, and dry a little bit. It's kind of strange. Down here, though, it's probably one of the most beautiful parts of the world, in my opinion. You will actually see a lot more of a greener environment. As you can see, it's pretty green overall, and it can make for some like beautiful like green mountains with lakes, that sort of kind of area. Great like tourist location, I would imagine. Now we do see a yellow plate here. I think that's just an exception. I'm not sure why that's there actually, but just know that Chile has white plates, except for that one for some reason. Our next country here is Argentina. And Argentina is actually pretty interesting because you can recognize it through its license plate. As you can see there, we have a white plate with a black dot in the center. You can kind of see it on this one as well. You can't see it on that one, but you can see it on that one right there. So I'd say about like 70% of the cars usually have that license plate. You can see it right there as well. So yeah, if you see a white license plate with a black dot in the center, then you are probably in Argentina. Also, the architecture, I noticed there are a lot of these like white kind of rectangular buildings, I would say. I don't know, you just have to familiarize yourself with it to be able to kind of understand that it's Argentinian architecture. But I find it quite distinct for whatever reason. However, you can see very similar architecture in Uruguay, so do keep that in mind. All right, our next location here is in northwestern Argentina, and similar to Chile, it kind of has those dry mountains, but it's definitely a lot greener, and it's not, doesn't quite look like Chile, really. Also, you have these double yellow lines here, which would signify that it isn't Chile. But just know that if you see an area in Argentina that has kind of dry, deserty mountains, you are most likely in the northwestern portion. Another great tip for Argentina is this very strange yellow and white road here. So these are much more common in Uruguay. However, you do see them in Argentina occasionally, but it'll be like, a yellow line, as you can see here, and then a white dashed line. And then also, this is sort of in the center of Argentina, kind of, actually it's more south, but in the south you kind of get this like very strange greenish dry mountains, but they're not quite the same as the ones we saw previously. It's probably a little more green, and the colors are definitely a little more light, I suppose. Also, a great tip for Argentina is you will always see a black car. So if you see this black car, you'll be able to differentiate it from most other South American countries, except Uruguay, of course, because Uruguay also has a black car. As an overview for Argentina, I would just say the northwestern portion has kind of those dry mountains for the most part. Buenos Aires, largest city. If you get a huge city location, you probably are in Buenos Aires. The sort of northern portion is kind of the same, like just mountains, kind of, but they're greener than the drier ones over here. Down here is a massive plains biome, pretty much, for the most part. So if you're in kind of a plainsy biome, and it looks like Argentina, you got the black car and everything, you're probably over here. And then down here you get a lot of those kind of like these locations where they're just, I can't describe it, kind of just strange looking, to be honest. But Argentina can be very difficult to pinpoint, but overall you could probably dissect it into those three chunks that I mentioned, with the kind of drier mountains over here, the plains biome, and the kind of strange looking greener mountains. Our next location here is Uruguay. So Uruguay, as I mentioned previously, you will also see that black car. But a huge distinction here is that Uruguay often has these wooden poles. I don't know why, but it pretty much has them everywhere. And if you see them, you're much more likely to be in Uruguay than you are to be in Argentina. Uruguay is primarily a flat sort of plainsy biome, which is great because in Argentina you only have that in kind of that central part of the country. So if you're able to see plains biome with a black car, probably more likely to be in Uruguay than Argentina, I would imagine. However, it is not guaranteed. Another great tip for Uruguay would be the same road that we mentioned in Argentina. However, do remember that it is much more common in Uruguay than it is in Argentina. So if you see this road, your best bet is Uruguay for sure. For an overview of Uruguay, I do not have too much to say. It's mainly just a very flat, green country with a black car, and those wooden poles can be helpful when comparing it to Argentina. However, if I do have anything to say, the coastlines will be much more tropical, obviously. And if you see red soil and you're in Uruguay, I would say the most likely bet is that you're up here, as it is closer to Brazil, which, as mentioned previously, probably the country with the most red soil. Our last country here is actually an interesting one. I believe it is pronounced Curacao, but it's this island above Venezuela, and I've gotten it occasionally in a diverse world. And I remember when I first got it, I was very angry, and I will show you why. So if you know, if you're in sort of a like Latin looking country, I guess you could say, and you have these metal bars, you're usually in Guatemala, right? So I guessed Guatemala. But of course, this isn't the car you would get in Guatemala. It's not quite right because the one in Guatemala is I believe it's like gray pretty much. This one is like black. And so if you get this black car with these sidebars here, then you are in Curacao. It can throw off a lot of people, and so I wanted to make sure that you guys do about this because I remember I was quite angry when it first happened to me. Quite unfortunate. But anyways, that is all I have to say about Curacao. As long as you see that, you should be all good. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions in the comments, I will be sure to answer them. But anyways, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. I will be making content every week. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.